A poor woman pays for an elderly man's groceries at a convenience. The next day, she receives a call. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Carla was walking through the convenience store, but her mind seemed to be elsewhere. Her problems felt overwhelming, yet she tried to stay strong for the sake of her 5-year-old son, Lucas. She carefully examined every item she wanted to take because she couldn't afford to spend much. She barely had enough to buy the basics. Her favorite section of the store was the one with items close to expiration, since they were usually cheaper and still in good condition. After picking up a few items, Carla went to the checkout. The store was crowded, but she was lucky to find a line with only one elderly man with a small basket of groceries. Soon after Carla joined the line, several people lined up behind her. I'm lucky, she thought. If she hadn't arrived when she did, she would have had to wait a long time at the checkout. The elderly man slowly took the groceries out of his basket, which seemed to irritate the people behind Carla. However, she remained calm. She understood that at a certain age, you no longer have the vitality you once had. At 30, she herself didn't feel as strong as she had in her 20s. The cashier rang up all the man's items and stated the total. The elderly man searched his pockets, looking confused. He repeated the gesture for a while and then stopped. The cashier continued to ask for payment, but the man stood almost motionless, as if he didn't know where he was. People in the line began to murmur complaints quietly but audibly. The man then said he had either lost his wallet or forgotten it at home. The cashier, irritated, asked the man to leave the line if he wasn't going to pay. But the elderly man stayed put, looking confused. Suddenly, he remembered something and said he urgently needed those groceries for his grandson's birthday. The cashier became even more annoyed because the man couldn't pay and the line was growing longer. The people in the line lost their patience and started telling the man to leave and make way for others who had things to do, criticizing him for holding up everyone. Carla listened, feeling indignant at the lack of empathy for the elderly man. She lived with her son and her elderly aunt, who had adopted her at 40 and was now 70 years old. Carla valued patience with the elderly, and the way they treated the man upset her. As the people in line became more agitated and the cashier got nervous, he asked the elderly man to leave the store. The crowd agreed, voicing their approval aloud. A security guard approached and asked the man to leave if he wasn't buying anything. Almost crying and with his head down, the elderly man began to take small steps out of the store, feeling humiliated and even more confused, not knowing where to go next. In that moment, Carla made a decision she couldn't fully explain, perhaps driven by a sense of justice or the heat of the moment. She asked the elderly man if he had checked all his pockets. He said he had, but checked again. Carla then offered to pay for his groceries. The cashier and the people in line fell silent at her gesture. Some thought she was naive, suspecting the man might be scamming her, but since it was her money, it was her decision to make. Carla's financial situation was dire, but she still chose to help the elderly man. He was incredibly grateful but accepted her help. Carla paid for her groceries along with his, which amounted to a significant sum. She had the money but would need to economize and cut back on some things for her son. With bags in hand, Carla and the man, who introduced himself as Joaquim, walked away from the checkout and the irritated crowd. They talked a bit, and Carla noticed Joaquim seemed a bit confused, not remembering certain details about his life. It was evident he had some memory problems, possibly Alzheimer's. After a few minutes, Joaquim remembered a piece of paper in his pocket, saying it was written by his grandson. Carla read the paper and saw it had Joaquim's address and full name, likely placed there by his grandson in case he got lost. Carla knew the city well and recognized the street, which wasn't far. She offered to help Joaquim with his bags, which were heavy, and they walked the 4 blocks to his house. As they walked, Carla noted how beautiful the grandson's handwriting was, and Joaquim's comments made it seem like his grandson was a child, but the handwriting wasn't that of a child. Perhaps his illness affected his perception. They reached Joaquim's home, a large and beautiful house. Carla made sure he lived there by watching him unlock the door before she left. Before parting, Joaquim asked for her phone number to thank her properly one day, insisting that no one had ever been so kind to him. Carla smiled, gave him her number, and said she needed nothing in return, having helped from the goodness of her heart. They said goodbye, and Carla began the long walk home, 4 kilometers, as she had spent her taxi money on Joaquim's groceries. Fortunately, her bags weren't too heavy, but she was exhausted by the time she got home, where her aunt and son were worried about her delay. She explained what happened to her aunt and played a bit with her son. Lucas was even paler, complaining of pain, and barely ate. Carla was worried about him. He needed surgery for a heart defect, but she couldn't afford it. The wait list for a free operation was long, and they didn't know when he would get the surgery. Carla had no fear or laziness about working. She was holding down 2 jobs to save up for Lucas's surgery. Born into a poor family, she always valued education despite her parents saying it was a waste of time and only in movies did people get rich by studying. Regardless, young Carla spent much of her time in the state library, loving to read and help people, which assured her she wanted to work in healthcare. After finishing her studies, she worked hard to become a nurse. Her father had passed away, but her aunt saw what she had achieved and changed her mind about education. As a nurse, Carla loved her job, but everything changed when she met Ricardo. They were deeply in love and made promises to each other. Their son Lucas was born from this relationship. However, Ricardo didn't enjoy married life or fatherhood. Calling himself a free spirit, he didn't find happiness in the family life he had. One day, he left, leaving only a note. Around this time, Lucas began showing symptoms of his heart defect, which didn't yet require surgery. Her aunt's health wasn't perfect either, often feeling unwell and requiring hospital visits. Carla quit her nursing job to care for her son, trusting Ricardo to provide for them, but that didn't happen. Now, she survived on her aunt's pension and Lucas's small allowance, which was very little. She worked delivering food and as a waitress, looking for a job in her field. The next morning, Carla woke to the sound of her phone ringing. It was an unknown number. She answered, and a man named Gabriel introduced himself as Joaquim's grandson. He thanked her for helping his grandfather pay for the groceries and bringing him home safely. Gabriel explained that his grandfather had signs of dementia and had gone missing a few times. He did everything he could to keep him safe, including putting his address in all his clothes. Gabriel was very grateful and wanted to repay Carla for the groceries. Despite his insistence, she refused. So his final request was for her and her family to join them for lunch over the weekend. Carla, embarrassed but accepting, made Gabriel happy. On the day of the lunch, Carla, her aunt, and Lucas went to Gabriel and Joaquim's home. They were warmly welcomed, and the table was set with an abundance of food. Carla felt like she was in a scene from a TV drama. Gabriel joked that it only seemed that way but told her to eat since in TV shows, they only take a bite and then say they have to go do something. His humor made Carla smile, and the conversation flowed naturally, with everyone exchanging life stories. However, little Lucas didn't seem well and soon felt dizzy, nearly fainting. Carla held her son, desperate as he worsened daily. Gabriel examined the boy, saying, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and after checking him, carried Lucas to his car, stating he needed immediate surgery. Gabriel's words chilled Carla, fearing for her son's life. They rushed to the hospital where Gabriel worked, leaving Joaquim and Carla's aunt at the house. Each second in the surgery room felt like an eternity for Carla. She prayed and cried, not knowing what else to do. Hours later, Gabriel emerged, announcing the surgery was successful and her son was out of danger. Carla, weeping, hugged Gabriel, promising to repay him somehow, but he said it wasn't necessary as he would cover all expenses. Carla couldn't believe it. Her selfless act of helping an elderly man had unexpectedly saved her son's life. She stayed by Lucas's side as Gabriel received a call and rushed out. She found his sudden departure strange but remained with Lucas. The next morning, Carla's aunt arrived at the hospital in tears, blaming herself. Carla calmed her down and asked her to explain. While alone with Joaquim, her aunt had gone to the bathroom, and upon returning, found him missing. She searched the house and nearby streets but eventually discovered that he had wandered off in confusion and been hit by a car. Joaquim was now in critical condition. Carla left Lucas with a nurse and visited Gabriel, trying to console him, but he remained silent. Carla feared he blamed her and her son, thinking if they hadn't been there, his grandfather wouldn't have left the house. Unfortunately, Joachim didn't survive. His last words were of gratitude to the kind woman who had helped him. At the funeral, Gabriel was quiet, seemingly in shock. Carla gave him space, respecting his grief. 5 days after Joachim's death, Gabriel still hadn't contacted them. Carla, saddened by the situation, respected his need for distance. One evening, her phone rang. It was Gabriel, apologizing for his behavior. Having lost his parents, Joachim was his last remaining relative, and he made it clear he didn't blame them for the accident. His grandfather was kind and would have wanted him to prioritize Lucas's life. Gabriel invited them to lunch again. Despite the tragedies, Carla was happy that everything had ended peacefully. 15 years later, Carla was in tears, holding her son's hand. Now 20, Lucas had been in an accident and was in a coma. Alongside the sadness in Carla's eyes was also anger. She vowed to make the person responsible for her son's condition pay. Much had changed in those 15 years, granting her influence and altering her character. Gabriel, now not only a doctor but also the hospital's owner, had transformed their friendship into a deep love. They became an unstoppable team, both in marriage and business. Their union led to success, a marriage, and the birth of their daughter, Julia. Lucas grew into a strong, responsible, and hard-working man. Carla's aunt had passed away a few years after Joachim. The family now consisted of Carla, Gabriel, Lucas, and Julia. Lucas, popular with women, had his heart won by Sophia. Though Carla tried to like her, she couldn't shake a feeling of distrust. Gabriel thought it was just maternal jealousy and fear of losing her son, but Carla's instincts told her something was off. Celebrating their 1-year anniversary, Lucas and Sophia took a trip to a mountainous, rainy area. Their car skidded and fell a few meters down a slope. Miraculously, Sophia suffered only minor injuries, but Lucas was in critical condition. Now, Carla blamed Sophia for the accident, believing it was her idea to celebrate there. She forbade Sophia from visiting Lucas and used her influence to ensure she couldn't find work in the city. Sophia endured Carla's wrath, living in a rundown cabin, surviving on help from friends and family, while feeling guilty about the accident. A year passed without news of Lucas. One day, Gabriel visited her, expressing pity and asking to speak elsewhere. In the car, he apologized for Carla's actions, explaining that grief had changed her but that kindness still existed within her. They arrived at Gabriel's home, where Carla, with tear-streaked eyes, waited. She apologized, explaining that losing a child had driven her to lash out. She recounted how she had caused Gabriel's grandfather's death, but had been forgiven. She admitted her faults and explained how she had tried to make Sophia's life miserable. Carla assured Sophia she had contacted everyone she knew to help her get a job. Sophia listened but couldn't forgive Carla, knowing only she understood her own suffering. Carla saw the resentment in Sophia's eyes but had one more thing to show. She opened the door to reveal Lucas, awake and sitting on the sofa. Sophia ran to her beloved's arms, overjoyed to see him conscious. Lucas had woken a month after falling into a coma, asking for Sophia. However, Carla lied, saying she had moved away and married someone else, devastating him. Gabriel, unable to tolerate Carla's transformation into a cruel person, warned he would seek a divorce if she didn't change. Reflecting on her actions, Carla realized her mistakes, how her pain had caused suffering for her son and the woman he loved. Lucas and Sophia reunited, moving into their own place. For months, Lucas didn't speak to Carla, a punishment more painful than anything else. Carla still had her daughter Julia, but part of her heart was missing without Lucas's presence. On Lucas's birthday, Carla wanted to wish him well, but he never responded. She shed tears over their photo album, her pain interrupted by a knock on the door. Lucas stood there with Sophia, who was slightly pregnant, both smiling. He greeted her. "Hi, Mom." Unable to hold back her tears, Carla embraced both her son and Sophia tightly. Dear viewers, Thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.